Every empire rose because of it. Every major war was fought over it. And every civilization that lost it disappeared. Before gold, before fiat, before Bitcoin, there was something far older. Land, the first currency, the oldest form of wealth, and the harshest measure of power humanity has ever known. Welcome to Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and where nothing's ever as simple as it looks. People talk about digital scarcity like it's a modern invention, as if Bitcoin was the first time humans turned math into value. But long before code, humans kept another kind of permanent ledger, written not in computers, but in the soil beneath their feet. Land was the original hard asset, finite, visible, and impossible to fake. You couldn't print it, clone it, or produce more of it. Every financial system that followed, gold, credit, fiat, crypto, was just an attempt to recreate what land already was, value backed by physical reality. Money was invented because not everyone could own land. It became a receipt, a tradable claim on access, without owning the earth itself. But the truth stayed the same. Land didn't exist to serve money. Money existed to serve land. In ancient Egypt, wealth was measured in acres along the Nile, not coins. Flooded fields were wealth. Harvests were liquidity. Pharaohs didn't hoard metal. They hoarded territory. Whoever owned the soil owned life. Fast forward to Rome, the world's first corporate empire. Conquered land became massive estates called latifundia, worked by slaves. Land in Rome wasn't just income. It was citizenship, collateral, and status combined. The poor didn't just lack money. They lacked a claim on existence. And when Rome fell, it didn't leave behind a currency. It left behind a system, feudalism. Europe's dark ages were defined by ownership, not ignorance. The king owned the crown. The church owned the land. Everyone else owned nothing. So much for the good old days of sound money. There was nothing sound about money if you had no deed. You could work a field your whole life and still die owing rent to someone who never touched the soil. Land was wealth, but only for the few allowed to claim it. The Middle Ages had their own blockchain, written in law, lineage, and violence. It was transparent to those who mattered, and unchangeable for those who didn't. The system didn't collapse because it failed. It collapsed because it became obvious. Peasants revolted. Merchants rose. And as capitalism emerged, land didn't disappear. It evolved. The Industrial Revolution was powered by land mortgages. Banks didn't lend on dreams. They lent on acres. Factories were built on collateral. Railroads cross-purchased land. Even Britain's first government bonds were backed by land rents. Capitalism didn't replace feudalism. It monetized it. Land became financialized, divided, titled, taxed, and turned into paper. Ownership shifted from privilege to product, and feudal power disguised itself as property rights. The feudal lord became the landlord. The serf became the tenant. New words, same dependency. Every time humanity invents a new kind of wealth, we end up rebuilding the same hierarchy. Gold? Just land condensed into metal. Fiat money? Just land abstracted. A promise to pay rent, written on paper. Bitcoin? A digital version of land. Finite, mined, owned, defended. Scarcity never disappeared. We simply learned how to simulate it. Even Bitcoiners call it digital real estate. The vocabulary hasn't changed, only the medium. Humans want one thing, ownership that outlives them. Bitcoiners call it self-sovereignty. Medieval nobles called it a title. Same instinct, different tools. But here's the truth. Even in a digital world, real power still belongs to whoever controls the ground beneath your feet. All other wealth flows back into land. When markets rise, profits flow into property. When inflation hits, land holds value best. When crises erupt, central banks stabilize the system by buying mortgages. You can't live in Bitcoin. You can't sleep inside a stock certificate. But land feeds you, shelters you, and can be defended. Every revolution eventually returns to it. Because land isn't just an asset. It's a stage where every other asset performs. Money evolves, technology evolves, but land repeats the same cycle. First comes land, then credit, then collapse. And when paper burns, humanity runs back to dirt, the only thing that can't be printed. It happened after the South Sea Bubble, after the crash of 1929, after 2008. Every digital boom ends in a physical rush back to real land. That's not superstition, it's gravity. Currencies inflate, technologies change, empires rise and fall, but land stays still, quietly compounding in value. Every era tries to reinvent land, gold, bonds, fiat, crypto, but none replace it. They only orbit around it. Even central banks, masters of abstract finance, still hoard land through property portfolios. They know that in the end, all value must settle somewhere real. Today, global real estate is worth over $380 trillion, more than all stocks and bonds on Earth combined. Every financial innovation still sits under a ceiling made of land. Land is the real reserve currency, the foundation of taxation, the benchmark of credit. It doesn't just generate wealth, it defines it. When governments borrow, they borrow against land. When banks lend, they lend into land. And when nations collapse, the land is what remains. We pretend ownership is modern and equal, but the top 10% still own 85% of all land value. Different era, same hierarchy. This isn't a housing market. It's a sorting system, a quiet continuation of feudalism wrapped in mortgages and market prices. The wealthy don't buy homes to live in them. They buy them to store capital, wealth that needs a physical anchor in a digital world. In cities like London and New York, entire neighborhoods have become financial vaults. Dark windows, locked doors, properties owned by offshore companies. These aren't homes. They're collateral with a skyline. And without real estate, most modern credit would collapse overnight. The moment you buy property, it becomes a data point in global finance. That's why interest rates control modern life. They decide who gets access to land. Raise rates and the gates close. Drop them and the bidding wars begin. It's not economic policy. It's modern land rationing. And today, land scarcity isn't natural, it's engineered. Governments restrict supply through zoning. Developers push prices through speculation. Central banks keep credit cheap to keep the system alive. Scarcity is no accident. It's the backbone of modern power. If land were affordable for everyone, the entire hierarchy would collapse. Because land isn't just where value lives. It's where power hides. In developing countries, land rights are the fight for survival. Elites and corporations quietly buy millions of acres for agriculture, minerals, and carbon futures. These aren't real estate deals. They're pre-claims on the future, on the resources the next century will depend on. Bitcoin tried to break the monopoly, a decentralized ledger, a fixed supply, a network outside politics. And for a moment, it looked possible. But over time, Bitcoin began to resemble the world it challenged. Early miners became digital landlords. They accumulated most of the supply and now rent it out. Scarcity concentrated again. The promise of freedom became a pyramid of timing and access. And when those profits were made, they ended up in real property. Crypto gains turned into condos. Tokens became titles. Even the language gave it away. Bitcoin mining, digital real estate, metaverse property, digital land for people who can't afford the real kind. And even crypto depends on geography, on electricity, hardware, servers, and physical infrastructure. Its independence is an illusion. Bitcoin is just land wearing a new mask. The game never moved online. It just expanded the board. The rule remains the same. Whoever controls scarcity controls value. Whoever controls value controls time. And whoever controls time controls labor. Even the world's richest tech companies measure power in land, campuses, data centers, and massive real estate holdings. They know the truth. No matter how digital life becomes, control still requires physical territory. Today's empire is real estate trusts and sovereign funds. And ordinary people, more landless than ever. Owning a home has become the modern test of citizenship, the line between insiders and outsiders. Renting isn't failure. It's taxation without legacy. The cost of existing on land you'll never own. The rich don't save cash. They save permanence. And permanence only exists in one place, the ground itself. Every currency is just a promise that you can stay on it. That's the original contract of civilization. Everything else, every currency, every token, is commentary. History doesn't reward simulations. It rewards whoever holds a deed. Gold mattered only because it came from land. And when the Wi-Fi dies, when markets freeze, when the servers go dark, it won't be Bitcoin that feeds you. It will be the soil someone else owns. Because no matter how digital our world becomes, they're not making any more land. If this changed the way you see wealth, hit subscribe. The answers are in history, and I'll show you where to look.